This figure depicts annual net change in forest area between 1990 and 2015. Notice that the green shaded colors represent a net gain in kilometers squared per year, and the yellow to orange and red colors represent a net loss in kilometers squared per year. So the countries that have experienced the greatest gain are depicted in the darker green, and China is one of those. The reason China is experiencing a net gain is because they're doing much to reforest areas which have already been clear-cut and try to regain the opportunity to grow forests and restore the landscape, as well as be able to selectively cut and harvest from those forests. So they're trying to basically restore large areas like the Loess Plateau, which have been completely void of vegetation as a result of deforestation. So other countries that are experiencing a net gain include the United States, as well as Russia, and a few countries in Europe and India. Countries that are still experiencing a net loss are depicted by Brazil and Indonesia, and those areas are experiencing greater than 5,000 square kilometers of net loss. Other countries that are experiencing a net loss in the yellow and orange, looks like much of South America is in a net loss situation, and most of Africa. Now please understand that the gray areas depict that there's such a small change of less than 50 square kilometers of gain or loss. So those countries are kind of excluded from representation on this map, and we're basically dealing with those countries that are experiencing over 500 net gain or over 500 net loss. This diagram depicts deforestation worldwide. Around the world, each year we are losing between 12 to 15 million hectares of trees. So looking at this graphic, the country that is losing the most is Brazil, depicted in the dark brown color. Then that's followed by Indonesia, with the next coloring in brown over here, north of Australia. Then it's followed by Russia. So the top three are Brazil, Indonesia, and Russia. This map is depicting tree cover loss and gain in the southeastern United States. The southern U.S. is home to the nation's most heavily forested region, making up 29% of the total U.S. forest land. The fine mosaic of tree cover loss, represented by pink, and tree cover gain, represented by blue, in this map shows how forests throughout the region are used as crops and are grown and harvested in a 5-year cycle rotation in order to provide timber or wood pulp for paper production. In fact, between the year 2000 and 2012, nearly 1/3 of the tree cover in this region was either lost or regrown. So this map is basically depicting that we are selectively harvesting our trees as well as replanting and allowing regrowth to occur. So pros and cons of deforestation. Some of these are self-explanatory, but cons are listed on the left side of the screen. When you remove forest, you have less carbon trapped in trees and plants, and then that goes up into the atmosphere, especially if they're using a slash and burn technique, and we result in more CO2 emissions through that process. Also, once the trees are removed, the soils are exposed to direct sunlight, and because you don't have that forest canopy and basically detritus matter falling to the ground and being decomposed and recycled into the soil for nutrients, you end up with soil that lacks nutrients and becomes more easily erodible. You can have poor water quality resulting from soil erosion from lands that once were forested and are now deforested. Therefore, when it rains, the vegetation is not helping to hold that soil in place, and it easily runs off into the adjacent streams and rivers. Now, removing trees obviously creates habitat loss, and removing those trees impacts the various species that relied upon that tree vegetation and subsequent vegetation that grew with the trees. So there's nowhere else for these animals to go, and as a result, we're seeing a biodiversity loss ripple effect from it as well. Now, a forested region will help take up the rainfall from different rain events and absorb that rainfall. Without these plants and trees, when it rains, the water runs off the landscape quickly into the surrounding streams and rivers, and as a result, you can have more frequent flooding or greater magnitude of flooding. And then finally, removing forests is a double-edged sword in regards to contributing to climate change. First, using the slash and burn technique results in carbon dioxide being emitted into the atmosphere. And then second, the trees are like the planet's lungs, where they absorb carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. So by removing large hectares of trees, you remove a storage component for carbon dioxide in the carbon cycle. And as a result, you don't have that carbon dioxide being removed from the atmosphere, and it remains in the atmosphere. So some pros to deforestation. Deforestation definitely allows for expansion and urbanization of areas as a result of population growth, and that goes hand in hand with industrialization. You can, by cutting down trees in forested regions, it allows for improved road systems and expansion of businesses as well. The other thing is that the trees are being cut down for usable material such as wood products and pulp for paper, as well as allowing land to be converted for agricultural purposes. And then it does create jobs as well, and it allows for food production. Okay, some interesting facts about the tropical rainforest. When we talk about the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, it's known as the lungs of the planet for its role of basically sucking out climate-changing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and absorbing it. Brazil loses 2 football fields in the Amazon every minute, so try to put that into perspective. In the last 40 years, Brazil has lost more than 18% of its rainforest, and that is about the size of an area of the state of California in the United States. There are about 180 to 200 indigenous tribes that live in the Amazon rainforest to this day. Some of these tribes haven't had a connection with other people. In 2015, environmental officials made more than 4,000 arrests and seized over 91 trucks and 115 chainsaws and roughly 2,000 truckloads of illegally harvested wood. So one of the challenges that they have with deforestation is dealing with the illegal cutting of trees in areas where it's not permitted. And then finally, an interesting Netflix documentary to watch, if you can take the time to do so, is titled First Contact: Lost Tribes of the Amazon. This is a documentary about a man and his team who contact a tribe that has never been in human contact before, and the reasons as to why these tribes had to leave their homes. So, there are definitely endangered species that live in the Amazon rainforest. It houses at least 10% of the world's known biodiversity, including endemic and endangered flora and fauna. There are millions of species that live in this rainforest. Most of them are still undescribed, and some of the world's most unusual wildlife lives here. It's basically one of the Earth's last safe places for jaguars, pictured here, the harpy eagle, and pink dolphins. and is home to thousands of birds and butterflies. Tree-dwelling species include the southern two-toed sloth, the pygmy marmosets, the saddleback and emperor tamarins, as well as Goldie's monkeys. The diversity in this region is just staggering. So, in Pennsylvania, which you may be familiar with our biodiversity, we have about 25,000 different known plant species and animals, of which about 2,100 are native to Pennsylvania. So we have a large number of invasive species. In the Amazon tropical rainforest, there are 40,000 different plant species alone, including banana, orchid, coffee, Brazil nut tree, poinsettia, the keiko tree, the rubber tree, and so on. It's also a birding paradise and contains more species of birds than any other ecosystem. There are also more than 4,000 different species of butterflies alone. So that in itself is amazing. And they have more than 3,000 freshwater fish species that live in the streams and rivers that flow through the Amazon rainforest. So 3,000 freshwater species in streams and rivers is actually more than the 2,000 species of fish which is found in the entire Atlantic Ocean. So just this river system within the Amazon rainforest has more variety of species of fish than what we find in the Atlantic Ocean. So it's a very unique ecosystem which also has over 370 different types of reptiles. This slide lists the various solutions that have been implemented to help stop deforestation. The first item is IBAMA, and this was an agency that was established in 1990 under the Federal Agency of the Ministry of the Environment to Conserve and Preserve Natural Resources in Brazil. So this agency actually has enforcement abilities to apply fines to anyone that breaches the requirements to preserve the forest, and they have about 1,000 people working for them, looking for people that are illegal harvesting. They're basically the watchmen for the region. In addition, they've expanded protected areas, and they've done so by creating a network of indigenous reserves and lands that have basically been set aside to preserve the forests. And this now encompasses more than half of Brazil's Amazon forest. The other thing they've done is allowed indigenous people to maintain their rightful ownership of land versus it being taken by companies that want to deforest and do agriculture. So indigenous people now own and control 20% of the Brazilian Amazon, and they have land tenured rights that are actually being enforced by people in the government, and they have the support of the government to help stop illegal encroachment on these lands by non-indigenous farmers, ranchers, and miners. So there's been a strong enforcement of logging laws, including seizing illegal timber, closing illegal sawmills, and jailing the perpetrators that are trying to illegal harvest the trees in areas that are owned by indigenous people or are in these protected areas. So the government's definitely committed to helping to stop deforestation in Brazil. The other thing they've done is they've improved their use of technology and satellite surveillance in order to allow members of IBAMA to monitor illegal activities via satellite, to basically be able to see where slash and burn and cutting of forest is occurring where it's not permitted to be done. And also they're instituting criminal penalties as well. IPAM and Amazon are research institutes that help try to teach ranchers and farmers and loggers that they can increase their productivity without having to cut down large areas of trees. Now, as far as you and I are concerned, we can focus on pushing zero deforestation policy. And in the 2006-2009 timeframe, this was really pushed in Brazil, where companies were exposed to using deforested land in raising their products. So, give you an example real quick. We have companies like McDonald's, Cargill Mars, that have committed to zero deforestation policy. that basically says that they are not going to deforest in order to make their products.